This is the Cancer Interviews podcast, and I'm your host, Bruce Morton. You know, some types of cancer are better known than others. We might hear a lot about breast cancer or prostate cancer, but we hear far less about anal cancer. On this episode, we're going to hear from a man who survived a diagnosis of anal cancer. He is Daniel Garza of Laguna Beach, California. What he has to say will be inspirational and educational. Here he is, and Daniel, welcome to Cancer Interviews.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we look forward to hearing your story. Now, what we want to do before we start with your story, your cancer story, is we'd like to learn a little bit more about you. So, Daniel, if you would, tell us a bit about where you're from, what you've done for work, and what you like to do for fun.
Of course. So, again, I'm Daniel G. Garza out of Laguna Beach, California. I'm originally from Mexico, raised in Texas. So I like to call myself an original Tex-Mex. For work, my primary job is advocate. I both am an independent advocate for different causes such as HIV, anal cancer, and mental health. And I also work part-time as the director of advocacy for Chiqui Charity and have been with them since actually the beginning of 2025. And for fun, I'm a workaholic, Bruce. So for fun, I either am editing videos, writing something, posting things. I like to spend time on my laptop, listening to music and eating some ice cream.
I think we have some things in common. I like to check all of those boxes, Daniel. Now, let's talk about your cancer journey. For all of us who have survived cancer, there was that time in which we thought our health was normal, and then it wasn't. Something went wrong, and maybe something else, and it demanded that we seek medical attention, and that medical attention led to a diagnosis of cancer. For you, when did you first notice something wrong?
So my journey with cancer started like in the fall, end of summer of 2014. I was getting bloated. I was having trouble going to the bathroom. There was spotting, and just to go to the bathroom, just have a bowel movement was so tiring. I would literally have to go lay down after a bowel movement. And I thought it was just my diet, the way that I was eating, because that's what the symptoms were calling for. It was something dietary, and my doctor was kind of backing that up. So fast forward to about March of 2015, I'm in for a regular screening. And I'm still having these complications, been having them for a while. Every time I go to the doctor, it's something new. Try this, try that. So finally, on that particular visit, I bring up the fact that I had a hernia. And the doctor is, you probably have a strangulated intestine. That's what's causing your problems. So I go in for surgery. We fixed the hernia, and we thought that was the end of the problem. I still had the symptoms. I still couldn't go to the bathroom, still was spotting, bloated, everything I ate, there was nowhere for it to go. My diagnosis after the colonoscopy and the biopsy, they had to do a finger probe, and that's how they felt the mass on the sphincter. And that's what led to the cancer diagnosis.
Now, I want to get back to your cancer journey in just a second, but quite obviously now, Daniel, you know more about anal cancer than you did at that time. Now, knowing what you know, would you say that your symptoms were typical symptoms for anal cancer?
Now, yes. Now that I've done the research 10 years later, so May 5th, 2015 was when I was diagnosed. So May 5th, 2025 was 10 years of my diagnosis. So after 10 years of research and speaking and promoting and advocating for, yes, I can go back and go, it wasn't my diet. It wasn't because I'm a gay man, sexual activity. It was the symptoms of anal cancer. But this is precisely why so many men go undiagnosed until it's the latter stage of stage 4 or terminal.
And what is your advice to those men?
Well, the CDC and the new health regulations say if you're after the age of 45, you should start getting those tests. I want to push it back. I tell particularly men who are gay and men who practice anal sex. If you have practiced anal sex and you're a certain age, possibly have been diagnosed or did not get diagnosed with HPV, go get a colonoscopy or get probed earlier. I would say 35, 40. If you're a straight man, then I would say 40 years old, start talking to your doctor about the possibilities of cancers. That's my recommendation. Of course, the number, if you look online, it says 45, but I think we should start younger than that.
Now, I have a two-part question for you. I'm going to get to that in just a second, but I want to remind you that we're confident you'll be able to learn some tips and tools that can help you through your cancer journey by hearing stories like Daniel's. But first, we'd like to invite you to please give us a like, leave a comment or review below, and share this story with your friends. Kindly click on the subscribe button below and the bell icon. That way you'll be notified the next time we release one of our cancer interviews. And we want to remind you that on cancer interviews, we are not purveyors of medical advice. If you seek medical advice, please contact a licensed healthcare professional. Now, Daniel, I have a two-part question for you. You've gotten this diagnosis. That clearly is horrific news. There's no such thing as a good time to be informed that you have cancers. So it's not a good day. We know it's a bad day, but I would like you to be specific. First part of this two-part question, just emotionally, how did you feel when you got that word?
So emotionally, I can neither confirm nor deny that I cried a little. It was one of those moments. Based on the information and the research, and because I had been in HIV advocacy for so long at that point, I was like 14 years, immediately after that diagnosis, after the colonoscopy, I went home and did research. So by the time I went for my diagnosis, it was already in my head, this is going to be cancer. Of course, my brain went to the typical colon cancer, colorectal cancer, because I wasn't aware about anal cancer. I didn't even know it existed until the conversations with my doctor. So there was a mixture of, dang, it's cancer. Like, okay, I'm gonna have to go through this and everything that follows cancer. And on the other side, it was like, finally, there's an answer to what's been going on with my body. Just for reference, at that point, I was pretty much eating soups and salads on a daily basis, just so that I would have a regular bowel movement and not eat too fatty or too big of a meals. So it was just refreshing to know that my symptoms had a name, and it wasn't my sex and it wasn't my diet. But yes, luckily I have a partner. We've been together now 13 years. We were together 3 years at the time. I had a good partner who right from the start said, I'll take care of you. I had a doctor we were a team. So that made it a lot easier to know. His statement when I was nervous was, we got this. So knowing that he was on my side, because we've all heard it when we get diagnosed, you're going to be fine. I've seen hundreds of these. Everything's going to be okay, which doesn't reassure you too much. But when he said, we got this, it completely changed the way that I looked at treatment, because I knew he was going to do everything that he could to make me feel better. So that took some of that stress and anxiety off.
Okay, now we talked about the emotional piece in this, but just physically, how did you feel after you got this diagnosis? Were you in pain?
So the pain had been there since like the fall of 2014. So I was already in pain physically. At that point, just getting around was difficult sometimes, because just for images purposes, the cancer was right on the sphincter. And although you would think like you wouldn't feel it, but to walk, to sit for a long time, even laying in bed on my back was difficult at times. So the uncomfortableness of the cancer was big by that time. And then your body is reacting because I'm bloated from not being able to go to the bathroom. I was almost septic. So for everything that happens to your body, everything starts to kind of shut down. things start to malfunction. Your liver is not working right, your kidneys aren't working right, your stomach is not digesting food correctly. Everything starts, and you know how that is. It starts to affect you mentally too, because if you're constantly in pain, your body just starts to adjust to that, and it just becomes hard. And then your spirit starts breaking down because you can't do anything. So it was a threefold moments of misery, if I can say that.
So you had that trifold dosage of difficulty and pain to deal with, but you still had waiting for you treatment. Different types of cancer are different, Daniel, in that some provide the person diagnosed with options in current terms of treatment, and with others, it's very cut and dried. What about you and anal cancer? Did you have treatment options?
There wasn't a whole lot of options available. It was either it was going to be surgery wasn't an option at that point because the cancer had completely taken over the half of my sphincter. So the doctor was like, if we do surgery, we're just going to take your sphincter off. So let's go for chemo and radiation and see how much we can save. So for those of you knowing about treatments, I had the pump with the portacath. So I went in on a Monday, they put the little pump on you, they plug you in, and you have it for the week, Monday through Friday. And I had 2 weeks of that at the very beginning and at the very end of radiation. And then I had 38 out of 40 rounds of radiation directly into my groin to eliminate it. Unfortunately, the cancer was gone, but it also took half my sphincter with it.
And not to ask a silly question, but there are people who have just been diagnosed with anal cancer, or they realize that they may be a candidate for it, and they may have a similar outcome to yours. What is life like with half a sphincter?
So for a while, I was in diapers. So after radiation, there were some complications. So I had a fistula, which causes a lot of problems for everybody who's had one understands. If you haven't, it's basically a tear. And this is like a little tunnel between the inside of your body and the outside. It's basically a second butt, which you have no control over. So from August of 2015 to April 1st of 2016, which if you keep track, that's April Fool's Day. So I had my ostomy surgery on April Fool's Day. But all that time I was wearing diapers because I had no control over bowel movements anymore. The sphincter is gone, basically. And then there's a fistula, which is a second hole. So miserable. To answer your question, it was miserable because I still wanted to go out and do things. I still wanted to go out to dinner and I was still traveling. We traveled to Florida, from California to Florida. That was an adventure. But every once in a while you had to stop and change your diaper. And that's, as an adult, it's not something that your mind can easily wrap around. So I was sad, definitely depression, felt miserable most of the time. And the mental and spiritual aspect of not having control over your body just completely breaks down your body.
And you'd mentioned going on chemo. Do you remember what type of medication you were on for chemo? Because there are different types.
Yes. So I had to go back and do some research. So it's the 5-fluorouracil. So it's called the 5-FU chemo. That's the treatment that I got. And I called my boyfriend to ask him, like, what was the chemo? Because he kept all the records. For anybody who's been through it, you get chemo brain and you forget all these things. But we had a binder. We had a binder with all the information, but it's at his house. I'm like, what was the chemo? And he was like, it's the 5-FU. And he's like, you can remember FU. So yes, FU chemo. So you can remember that.
Now, there must have been a point, however, in which you noticed things changing for the better, things taking a turn for the better. What was that like?
Yeah, so for those of you keeping track of the dates, from August to April, I was so against getting my ostomy. I did not want an ostomy bag. I thought that was going to be the end of me. How was I going to survive? How was I going to live? How was I going to work? So finally, I did a little research, talked to a couple of people, and they gave me the brighter side of having an ostomy. By then, the fistula had almost completely healed. And let me just say this. I also did 40 rounds of hyperbaric chamber treatment. So that helped seal the fistula. After my ostomy, I could not believe the 180 that my life did. Once I got used to having my bag, and my ostomy's name is Tommy. So once Tommy and I made peace, I'm not going to say we're friends yet. Even 9 years later, we're not friends yet. But we coexist. We know we have to live with each other. But I've been able to continue my career as an advocate, as a life coach. I do entertainment. I'm an actor and a comic as well. I've traveled. I've been able to go around the world. I was in Germany and Amsterdam last year for work. I've been able to now, which is something that I also did with HIV and mental health. I've been able to take my diagnosis and turn it around and use it as my platform for advocacy. So I get called to talk about anal cancer, and particularly in a society, both in the Latino community and in the gay community, where anal cancer is not talked about a lot because of the stigma, the shame, the secrecy. I've been able to step forward, and I don't have anybody to thank or blame other than me just being a talker of my life. But I've been able to present and talk to people and be on panels and talk about anal cancer and how it's affected me and share my story. And hopefully that's opening some doors for more conversation.
Now, I want to go backwards a bit on your story, just a tad, Daniel, to the time in which you and Tommy were getting acquainted. I know that it is not easy to manage an ostomy bag, and as I have learned from many of our interviews, people have all sorts of different stories about their introduction to their ostomy bag. In other words, some of them will say, well, I had an ostomy nurse who was tremendous, and she wouldn't let me out of the hospital or whatever facility you were in until she was 100% sure that you knew how to maintain it. And there were other nurses who just said, you're on your own. What was your experience like at the outset?
Yes. So I was in the hospital for 2 days when they let me go. So on the surgery one day, I was there another day. On the third day, basically, at the end of the day, they were like, you're going home. So on that first day, a nurse came in to show me how to put my ostomy bag on and the wafer and everything. And but you're groggy. You're kind of not really understanding, even though the surgery has been explained to you several times. It's one of those things that you have to live it to see what it's like, and then to see part of your inside out. I mean, your intestine is basically outside, and that's a very traumatic moment. And I think that kind of blocks you a little bit. So I learned a little at the hospital. I came home. My first home nurse, who would come every other day, was not very good. She was not very concerned about my well-being. In fact, her and my boyfriend would talk way more than we would. For some reason, they just got along, and they would be chatting the whole time. So finally, I called the nursing home and the nursing office and had her fired. I'm like, she's not doing anything for me. I went through 3 nurses. The third one, and this is like 3-4 months in, was finally able to sit with me and lay me down and say, because I was having leakage problems and I was having reaction problems. So she was the one that laid me down and said, let me show you while you do it let me show you how to put on the wafer and how to seal the bag and how to make sure everything. But I also went through several products. So there's different companies that make ostomy bags. I had to go through like 2 different companies before I found the one that worked for me. So not everything at first is going to work for everybody. It took a little trial and error. And then you start learning as you, for me, chemo, I became lactose intolerant after chemo. So learning that while with the bag was very interesting while I was at a restaurant. Flying, because the bag builds up air when you fly. So learning that, learning how to take care of yourself while you're flying. For anybody who flies, those bathrooms are not comfortable at all. So there's a lot of trial, and still today, almost 9 years later, I'm still learning new things about Tommy, sometimes that I didn't know.
Daniel, we're about to wrap up now, but I do want to bring up a subject that you touched on at the beginning, and the role that it has played for you. You have become familiar with the support group Man Up to Cancer. If you would, tell us a bit about what Man Up does, or what it's done for you, and what it can do for others.
Sure. So I first learned about Man Up to Cancer, I think when they were just started, which was about 5 years ago. So we're looking at like 2017, 2018, somewhere around there. No, 2020. So, and joined them only because I was looking for a group of men that could talk about cancer and talk about ostomies and stuff. Then last year, 2024, is when I really got a little busier on the website, on the Facebook page, commenting more, being more present, joining the support groups, jumping in on the Zoom calls. And then in the fall of 2024 was my first gathering of the wolves, which is the camp retreat that they hold every year. And it was up in the Poconos in New York. One of the best experiences ever. First of all, to be around, I think it was 150 guys, all at some stage of cancer, different cancers, some with ostomies. In fact, I think on the Facebook page, there's a picture of all the ostomates together, which is really cool to see everybody without a shirt. I have a lot of body issues still, so it was cool to be shirtless among other guys and just feel comfortable. There's a comfort in a pack, which is why it's the gathering of the wolves. Wolves in a pack. You just feel more dominant, more comfortable. It really did help me grow mentally, physically, and spiritually to be part of Men Up to Cancer. And I'm ready for the 2025 gathering. In fact, I'm going to be doing stand-up comedy at the 2025 gathering. So for anybody who's listening who's going to be there, you'll get to enjoy some of my dumb butt jokes.
Excellent. Our guest has been Daniel Garza of Laguna Beach, California. Daniel, thanks very much for sharing your story. It's a story that's going to be informative for those who are listening, especially those who might just be starting a journey of anal cancer or they think they're a candidate for it. That's going to be very helpful for them. So, Daniel, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for being with us on Cancer Interviews.
My pleasure. Thank you, Bruce.
And we want to remind you as we conclude this episode that if you or a loved one are on a cancer journey, you are not alone. There are people out there like Daniel Garza, organizations like Man Up to Cancer that can help to ease that cancer journey. So until next time, we'll see you on down the road.